slides, not much. I don't want to get you bored. And we'll quickly, in about 10 minutes, we'll move into a real demo using a Kubernetes scenario. I will share with a few applications running, but I'll show you how Sysdig Cloud looks like, the kind of things we can do, monitoring dashboards, alerts, a little bit of everything. I'll show you a bit of the Sysdig command line tool, the open source one as well, in case you don't know it. And that's pretty much everything I had to say to start. Here on the top right of your screen, you have your Zoom application. There you have the chat and the Q&A window. So if you have any questions or any time, just drop them there, and I'll be happy to answer them as we go. If you can chat in a little bit about where you are with containers, if it's still evaluating, already using them for development or for production, if you're using plain Docker or you're using any kind of orchestration platform like Kubernetes, DCOS, Mesos, Docker Swarm, anything like that, please let us know. We'll try to tailor this demo as much as possible to those things that you are using already. And yeah, let's get this started. So first of all, I want to give you a little bit of context. We think that monitoring or traditional monitoring tool doesn't really work well with containers. The model that traditional monitoring follow basically breaks with using either containers or microservices. And that's why there is need out there for this, and we decided to create Sysdig and Sysdig Cloud. Sysdig Cloud was created since the beginning to be the first and the only solution that can natively monitor any infrastructure and application running in containers or designed as microservices. And I'm going to show you why. Basically, there are three big issues with using traditional monitoring tools with containers. First is that legacy monitoring approaches cannot see inside containers. Containers are basically black boxes. That's great for operations, that's great for development, but it's not great for monitoring, for having a look at what's doing inside. There have been different approaches that people take. One was just run your monitoring agent inside of the container, but that breaks the containers or the Docker principles that containers are one process, lightweight process without too many dependencies. So that basically breaks the whole design. In addition, when using microservices design architectures, traditional tools, they don't understand the high-level concepts. They don't understand the service level design of your infrastructure. They just understand the units, servers, containers, or either virtual machines. So when trying to use those applications that you might already have and you have been using in the past for monitoring into Docker, containers, or microservices, there are quite a few things that they are missing, and they are not as optimized as they could be. That's why we came up with a way of looking at what's happening inside of your containers, and we created this technology that we call Sysdig Containerization. Basically, what we can do here is not only looking at what your application doing or instrumenting your applications, we can look across the whole infrastructure, the operating system, the containers, the network infrastructure, and even the apps. And you might be wondering how we can have the full visibility of everything happening and without too much instrumentation. Well, basically what we do, the only instrumentation we do happens at the kernel level, usually at the Linux kernel level. what we do is we load the kernel module, and this kernel module is able to capture all the operating system calls happening. Either if your application or processes are running inside containers, either Docker, Rockhead, or canonical container technology, or if it's just an application running in that host, in the server. Being able to capture all these calls, we are able to forward them into a user space process that typically is deployed in a container as well. And that process is able to calculate, to discover, to generate all the metrics that you need, obviously all of them auto-discover, just only from the system calls. The benefit of doing this is that you're able to automatically see everything happening on each of your servers in your infrastructure, just deploying one of these containers with the Sysdig agent. And then automatically we'll be discovering everything happening on your containers. This is probably, let me go back, because this is probably one of the points where people have more questions. This is how we are able to discover, monitor, see everything happening on the infrastructure, and it's kind of there is a little bit of magic happening here. So I don't know if you have at this moment any questions on or regarding about how we do this metric collection or metric auto-discovery. As I said, this user space agent from where we collect all the system calls can be deployed in a Docker container if you are using Docker, but if you are not using containers, can be also deployed as a system service, as a daemon. The kernel module we load, it's very, very small. Basically, all it does is to capture all the system calls and copy them into a buffer. And this user space process reads from that buffer and discovers all the metrics. So how we write on memory, on your storage devices, or on the network socket. And from there, we are able to discover system-level metrics, CPU, memory, input, output, metrics like that. Service or infrastructure-level metrics, like is your web server running, how many connections you have per second, is your database running. But we can also go one step further and decode some protocols from those network sockets and then give you some higher level metrics like HTTP requests or SQL queries. We'll see more about that in the future. As I said, if you have any questions, just let me know on the chat or on the Q&A, and I'll try to answer those as soon as I can. Traditionally, deploying monitoring tools is being just getting some dashboards, configuring some alerts, and having a look. And those dashboards are great, being able to see how is your system performing. Alerts are great to let you know how, if there is any incident or something going wrong in your infrastructure that's worth you having a look. But there is no much towards doing troubleshooting, towards finding out how you can fix that problem, that issue that you have at the moment in your infrastructure. With Sysdig Cloud, we thought that it was great to have everything to give you the possibility of monitoring, of alerting, but also helping you to find where is the problem in your infrastructure when you need to have a look at optimizing performance or changing some configuration. So that's why we say that Sysdig Cloud can help you on doing service-oriented performance management. So we understand these higher level concepts or services when you run a microservices operated infrastructure. We can give you application intelligent monitoring and alerting, so we can do the monitoring, the alerts, the dashboards, and everything. But we can also give you application layer information, like some services like HTTP servers, database servers, information and metrics. And the third point I wanted to mention here is that we can give you some very interesting information when doing troubleshooting. That's what we call trace-driven troubleshooting. We'll have a look at this now. So when adopting microservices infrastructure, instead of having a server or a few servers running one service, suddenly we have a bunch of servers that they are operated by Docker Swarm, Kubernetes, DCOS, Mesos, and those platforms, they have a scheduler that decides where every container is being run. So at the end, you have like a bunch of servers running all kind of different containers, and traditional monitoring tools, they were able to give you container-specific information and metrics, but now you don't want to see metrics or information individually for each of these containers. You want to have an information or a monitoring solution that gives you this kind of information, how my services are operating at this high level. For example, we can answer questions like, what's the response time of my Cassandra service that's currently distributed across 3 data centers and 30 different physical servers. I'm not interested in knowing how one specific container is performing. I want to know how my service overall is performing. And this is something we can do with Sysdig Cloud. We are able to reorganize, to aggregate all these metrics, all the information, and give you this service-oriented level. How we can do that? Well, basically, those orchestration platforms I mentioned before, Mesos, DCOS, Kubernetes, Docker Swarm, are the ones that they know how your infrastructure is spread, where each container is running, and what kind of service is each container running. We can talk to them. We can talk to Kubernetes API, Mesos API, and then we are able to integrate with these platforms and give you all the information you need organized in this way. So you are able to see how your infrastructure is performing at a high level, and eventually, when you need to do troubleshooting, you will be able to drill down to the specific of each container or specific namespaces or different parts. The other thing that's very interesting here is this application thing we call application intelligent monitoring and alerting. We think that you shouldn't invest your time in tuning your monitoring application. Like when you are using software like Kubernetes or Mesos, it gives you already a set of tools so you can focus on what really matters, which is deploying your application and maintaining your application. So the same way we are, or following the same strategy, we give you the tools to monitor that infrastructure. So for example, one of the things that Sysdig Cloud can do is automatically discover what every container is doing, what kind of service is running inside, and then with templates, we give you pre-built dashboards to see the important metrics and important information of those services running on those containers. If you're running things like Java apps with JMX metrics, or you need custom metrics with Ssl, we are able to auto-discover those metrics and make them available in dashboards and alerts for you as well. And if you are some of these people that like anomaly detection and they want to automatically spot things that might not be running as they should, we also give you the possibility of doing that with Sysdig Cloud. The idea is that when using these container systems where you have your developers deploying applications, you are able to auto-discover any new application, any new service being deployed in your container platform, auto-discover it, auto-generate dashboards and alert information, and use it for your own benefit, or looking at this from an operation perspective, or giving this information, this monitoring information, the performance information, and the troubleshooting tools to the developers that they are deploying the application. This slide here is what we call the logo SIP, and it's going to be very useful to give you a taste of how many things we are able to monitor. Some of them, hopefully you are using them already. If you see some, or if you are using some that you don't see them here, please talk to us, because we are building new integrations every month. And if you want to build your own, we offer an API and a small framework to run different scripts in Python or other languages, so you can build your own checks and monitor the different applications. But probably we have something for that already. The last thing I wanted to mention before ending with the slides, and I already introduced this idea before. Traditional monitoring tools, they have been about dashboards, alerts, but they have not been great on helping you doing troubleshooting. And this is something we wanted to change with. I didn't notice we had a question here. I can see Apache. What does it mean? Let me go back to the previous slide. We have a bunch of different software from the Apache Foundation that we can monitor. We can monitor Apache HTTP server, but for example, Kafka, where are you? Here, there we go. Kafka, it's also from the Apache Foundation, and we can monitor Kafka. So in this case, the Apache icon means the Apache HTTP server, but there are a few other projects from the Apache Foundation that we can monitor, like Kafka here. I can see Solar here, and probably I will be missing a few others as well. We can monitor, you will see a few logos from different distributions like Ubuntu, Red Hat, Debian. That basically means that the agent can be deployed either as a Docker container that you can pull from Docker Hub or your own registry. But if you have like or virtual hosts, and then you have other parts of your infrastructure that's running containers, you can still install Sysdig Cloud Agent on those virtual machines, on those physical hosts, and we'll be able to monitor the applications and obviously the operating system running there. Hopefully that answered your question. Again, if you have any other thing, please let me know. I'll try to answer all your questions. Last slide before moving into what's really interesting here today, the demo. Trace-driven troubleshooting. As I said, when we build Sysdig Cloud, we try to give you extra help, give you more tools to do troubleshooting, because it's actually the most tricky part. That's why we created this workflow, that when you see dashboards, you are able to use that metadata, that information coming from your Kubernetes, from your Mesos, and you're able to reorganize and shape all the metrics, all the information in a way that's going to help you a lot troubleshoot what's going on. But additionally, which is we are able to give you all the system calls, basically everything that happened every time that an alert gets triggered. So for example, imagine a situation that you have a service, an alert gets triggered, things get even worse. The service completely crashes, and then your schedule layer decides to destroy those containers. You won't be able to troubleshoot what happened there. Well, if you're using Sysdig Cloud and you enable the Sysdig capture option on alerts, we'll be able to store everything that happened when an alert got triggered, and then you can download that file, that Sysdig capture file containing all the system calls, and use the command line open source tool to troubleshoot that basically would happen. I'll show you after the Sysdig Cloud demo. Probably it's now a good time again to stop and see if you have any question. Otherwise, we'll use the next minutes to have a look at what it's Sysdig Cloud and what we can do. One of the parts that I'd like to start with Sysdig Cloud is this. This is a dashboard, a physical map of your infrastructure. And this is the kind of information that traditional tools they are able to give you. We see here that we have 4 different hosts. We'll see later, or I'll show you later, that this is a Kubernetes cluster, but from a physical perspective, what traditional monitoring tools can show you is basically this. I have 4 servers. I see a metric on each of these boxes. In this case, it's the CPU. And I see that they are talking to each other. And in this case, showing and graphing their requests per second between these servers. But when you want to see what's going on here, even if you can drill down and see what's running inside of this host, I'm going to show you the different containers running inside. This is really messy. It's not that helpful to know how your infrastructure and how the services are operating at a higher level. So that's why I was mentioning before that we are able to talk to your Kubernetes, to your Docker, Docker Compose, Docker Center, DCOS, Mesor, so basically any container orchestration platform that you are using, and reorganize, reshape the information into different ways. So for example, I have here my Kubernetes system, and I see that they have 2 namespaces, development namespace, production namespace. If I zoom in, I will be able to see the different services that I have running. I have a WordPress service with a client talking to my WordPress service, and the WordPress service talking to my SQL, but also I can identify Java app talking to Redis and to Mongo. And what is very interesting here is that I can keep zooming in, and I'm going to be able to understand how things are working. So for example, I can see my client talking to the WordPress service, but look at this. I can identify that inside WordPress, inside this service, I have a load balancer created, is this gray box created by Kubernetes, that it's, in this case, redirecting the traffic to one container running WordPress, and then the WordPress container talks to my MySQL service with my MySQL container running inside. If we look here, for example, at this Java app, in this case, I have 3 replicas of my Java app, and I see how the load balancer is distributing the traffic between each of my replica sets. I can keep zooming in from in that case, it was Kubernetes namespace into my service, the deployment, the Kubernetes pod, down to the Docker container, and inside the Docker container, the processes running inside of each container. So that's very interesting, to being able to explore how it's basically your infrastructure works. All the information is auto-discovered from just installing the Sysdig Cloud agent in your house. And actually, this is something I wanted to show you live, to get at least a taste of how easy it is to deploy Sysdig across your infrastructure and get things monitoring very quickly. So if I go here to settings and I go to agent installation, I can, we offer different installation methods, but if you want to install just running one container, I can copy this huge line, which is a Docker run command. And if I run this on my own laptop, I can see that the Sysdig agent process started running, and I have a few other Docker containers, but very quickly, in a few seconds, we'll see how this Docker or how my host appears in here in the Sysdig Cloud. If you or it already did. If you see here, this is deleted, which is my own laptop, and I already see here that I have 3 containers running. One is the Sysdig agent, and then I have a bunch of containers. One WordPress container and one database. But what I'm showing you here at the moment is the Explorer tab. The Explorer tab is probably the section where you will be spending more time inside Sysdig Cloud. You can understand this like an HTOP for your entire infrastructure. You can see here a table with the different servers running or connected, and different columns with different metrics: CPU, memory, network, requests, file system usage. And here we have created a few different templates. So this is an overview, but if you're interested in looking more at the network, we have a network template. Or if you're more interested at looking at how your file system it's performing, we have another template. What is very interesting here is that at the moment, I'm showing you a physical view. In this case, I have 4 different hosts running in AWS, reporting into Sysdig Cloud, and I see the different containers running inside. As I mentioned before, we can connect and we can integrate with your container orchestration platform, like, for example, Kubernetes, and use the metadata, the tags, the labels, to regroup this information and give you different view. So, for example, if I apply this view, now I'm going to show you the same view I could show you before in the topology map. I have my Kubernetes system, some containers that they have not been tagged, but what is very interesting here, my development environment and my production environment. And I see that inside each of these, I have a set of apps: Cassandra, a client, Java app, Java client, MongoDB, MySQL, Redis, WordPress, and the same from production. What I can do now is to, for example, click on one of these, and I already get one of these views. These views are available for each of the scopes that you select on this table. So if I click here, I will get a view of what is my Cassandra service inside production running. But if I'm interested in one pod or one container, I can change things here. Let me show you, for example, in this case, Cassandra. This is the overview by process view, and we are able to give you an aggregated view of the containers. So we give you CPU usage, memory usage, network usage, connection disk usage, and a few graphs like CPU, the network, etc. But I told you before that we are able to auto-discover and give you some application layer metrics. So I know this is a Cassandra service. So what happens if I apply a Cassandra overview view on top of this service? So automatically, I'm able to discover service level views like request into Cassandra, write request, read request, write latency, read latency, or disk usage. The same happens for other services. So for example, I got here my SQL, And if I apply on my SQL view, I'm going to be able to give you my SQL service level metrics, and all of this happening without any kind of service or infrastructure instrumentation, just deploying the Sysdig agent inside. Request per second, errors, average request time, and then things like top queries happening on your MySQL servers, or top tables, slowest queries, or slowest tables. We are able to auto-discover all this information and report it to you just by capturing all the system calls, reading and what's happening, for example, in this case, the network sockets, and being able to decode some application protocols, like in this case, MySQL. I could show you, for example, the same thing for an HTTP server, but I don't want to show you that on an Nginx or an Apache server, because that would be very easy. I have this Java app here that I know it's a web service. So if I apply an HTTP overview dashboard on top of this Java app, I'm going to be able to give you metrics like if it was a real web server, but at the end, all it has is a web service. So I can give you request count, HTTP error counts, average request time, maximum request time, top URLs, slowest URLs, or HTTP status codes. So this is the kind of information we can give you. We have pre-built these dashboards, but if you are more interested in specific metrics, you can obviously see those. So for example, if I'm interested in having some JMX metrics, I can filter out here all the JMX metrics I'm reporting, or even stats.d metrics. So if I click here, I will be able to say, this is, I'm not sure, no, I haven't enabled this metrics. But if, for example, MySQL connection metrics, or MySQL metrics, so I, let me select the right metric. Oh, my bad. You see, I'm selecting this from the Java app, so that's why it's not working. If I click on the right scope, in this case, MySQL, I would be able to see the metrics happening. Okay, so remember, it's very important to select the right scope. So we have a few questions here. These are quite confidential information. Where this information is stored? Yes, indeed. In some cases, this can be some confidential information. That's why Sysdig Cloud, it's available as a SaaS service, but for those organizations that they might be concerned about their information, they can either disable some of the metrics or deploy Sysdig Cloud on-prem on their own infrastructure. Sysdig Cloud can be deployed in your own data center using Kubernetes or some other orchestration systems, and you can host everything and decide how do you want to scale things, what kind of metrics you want to configure. It's basically a service that you will be deploying by your own as well. In addition to all these metrics and graphs and dashboards, we also have alerts. And alerts is something we can create from basically every context. So for example, I'm here in the scope of MySQL connections. So if I click here in this little bell, add alert, I'm able to see the new alert dialog. This alert allows me to use, again, this metadata we are getting from Kubernetes to configure the scope. So I can define here if this alert will be only for my production environment or for my development environment, or if I want to have this alert only on my SQL service, basically anywhere. Then I can set a number of conditions. So for example, if I want to configure some manual logic, so like I can even use advanced Boolean logic and use any function like CPU, any metric at the end. We can use greater than, smaller than, etc. And we can also use anomaly detection. We can use baseline that basically compares to how those metrics they were behaving in the past. And we also have host comparison. So if you have, for example, a load balancer and 4 servers that they should be behaving the same, you can do host comparison anomaly detection between these. You can add additional segmentation for the metrics. You can add where clauses or wait times. You can add some additional information. And this is, I'm not sure if this is, yes, let me zoom out. There we go. We can add some, or we can configure some additional notification channels. So, for example, if I want to dispatch alerts to not only your email, but PagerDuty, VictorOps, Opsgenie, Slack, HipChat, or basically anywhere using Amazon SNS, it's something that you can do. And at the end, here we have this other feature that it's very interesting, which is being able to automatically trigger a Sysdig capture every time the alert gets fired. As I mentioned before, this is very helpful for when doing troubleshooting. So when all the conditions met and the alert gets triggered, the Sysdig agent installed in each of your hosts will start capturing all the system calls, and those calls they will get stored into a file either in Amazon S3 or in your own bucket, and you eventually later on when you try to do some post-mortem analysis or troubleshoot what happened, you can download the file offline to your own laptop and open it with the Sysdig command line open source version and have a look at what happened in your infrastructure. Another thing I want to mention here, and let me zoom in again, there we go, are events. Sysdig Cloud can collect events, either alerts that you have configured previously, we saw it, but we can also listen to events coming from your Docker service, like a container being created or destroyed, or from any other orchestration tool like Kubernetes. In this case, we can see, for example, we have a Jenkins integrations, and we can see how Jenkins started a WordPress deploy, and how here we start how Jenkins started the deploy. The previous containers got killed. I created some containers, and then some alerts got triggered, and then Jenkins started to do a rollback and created the old version of the containers, and we can see, for example, here how Jenkins completed the rollback. One of the things I wanted to show you, and it's probably going to be a better view than this, is I mentioned before that Sysdig Cloud is great at helping you to troubleshoot, to find out what happened and why something went wrong in your infrastructure. This is a list of the different alerts that got triggered. And I'm going to choose, for example, this, the last one. That is a MySQL alert on the number of connections. So basically, when the number of connections is below 2, trigger alert. I can see here how this metric evolved over time. And here we can see that there was a drop and then recover. So I could compare to how is this metric behaving now. But what is very interesting is that I can click here, explore event, and then what Sysdig Cloud does is to take me back in time into the Explorer view, exactly in the context of where this alert was triggered. So if you have a look here at the time navigation section, where you can see that we are in the past, exactly at the moment when that alert got triggered. I'm showing you here all the relevant metrics, the MySQL metrics, and I'm on the scope of my development environment with MySQL where this alert got triggered. And if I click here, I can see that this is exactly where the alert got triggered. Using again the metadata, what I can do is to try to reshape all this information and see what happened. So for example, I can say, okay, I want to see here a deployment view. So I want to see my MySQL service. Okay, so now I have selected my overall MySQL service. And I know this was the behavior on development, but I want to compare this with my production environment. So I know that Kubernetes has a meta tag, which is namespace. And if I click here, I can see now I have segmented my metrics, and I can compare my production versus my development. So I can see that also there was a problem in my production environment. So this is the kind of things you can do with Sysdig Cloud. And it's very, very interesting being able to leverage that information that you already have in your Kubernetes, DCOS, Mesos, whatever orchestration platform you're using, and use that to organize, reshape how all your information is coming to your monitoring system and create dashboards into different way. One of the last things I want to show you here in dashboards, these are completely customizable dashboards. So I wanted to show you, for example, this Kubernetes overview. And we can give you, again, higher level information, for example, host capacity, top namespaces, request by service, and you can zoom in, zoom out, all the information, etc. We have another question. Is there any way to monitor SSL certificate expiration and disk usage? Yes, we have a lot of different metrics coming into Sysdig. One of the things we do is we collect all the metrics, and all the metrics they get forwarded into Sysdig Cloud, and then we will decide which metrics we show you in each context. Okay, in this usage is a metric that you can come here to explore, and you can, depending on the different grouping you have here, you have the largest file system usage in here, and then the root file system. Obviously, you can configure the different columns that you can have here, and you can select the scope where you want to see this metric. In any other context, so for example, I can click here in WordPress and filter by that metric that I know it's FS largest use percent. So I can monitor usage, free space, or bytes use, bytes free, or even nodes. If you want to monitor things like SSL certificates, what I would recommend to do is to use one of the checks we have. Checks are basically scripts, integrations that run alongside each of the agents, and use those to forward different metrics into Sysdig Cloud. That could come as an S.D metric, or as a regular custom metric, and you could basically do 0 if it's working fine, 1 if the certificate is expired, or you could configure your check to trigger into one value 60 days before expiration date. But again, this is something you would have to configure by your own. Next, do you know if we have any other question? Is there some specific part of Sysdig Cloud that you would be interested in exploring?
Doesn't look like any questions on the line now, but Jorge and I will stay on for a couple more minutes if anyone else has questions or wants to chat in anything. I'm also going to put a link to our open source project as well, which you can use to download to troubleshoot the captures and stuff like that Jorge talked about.
Since we still have a few minutes, I'll take this chance to show you a little bit about the open source tool. So let me make this bigger for you. Now, let me see how this works. There we go. So I have here a capture file, one of those that you can trigger automatically with each of the alerts. And if I open this with the Sysdig open source tool, you will see that the interface is very similar to HTOP, but we have a bunch of extra views or features. So for example, I can see the containers that they were running. So I have 2 containers, Sysdig and Redis. If I click on that container, I can see the process running inside. And for example, here, if I do F5, I can see all the traffic. Actually, I'm going to format this better as this format. I'm going to being able to see all the traffic, all the system calls, how they they wrote on the network sockets that we can see here. And I can identify the Redis traffic. So for example, I can see here how a counter got incremented, or how I did a get over a counter, etc., etc. I can also dig into the process and see all the system calls that were happening. So you will see that I just wanted to show you a few things, because it's a big tool, but this is the kind of information you can see with Sysdig Cloud. We have one question: is there any minimum kernel version need to run with Sysdig? I'm not sure if we have any requirements in that regard. With Sysdig Cloud, when you deploy either the container with the agent or the package, we have a number of kernel modules pre-built for the most popular kernels, for Ubuntu, Debian, Red Hat, etc. Actually, the kernel is certified for Red Hat if you are using commercial support from Red Hat. And in case we don't find a kernel running that matches the versions that we have built, we will be using DKMS to rebuild the kernel module require. The kernel module is very, very simple. It's just below 1,000 lines of code, which is basically nothing. And it's very easy to manage. As I said, if we don't have a pre-built version, rebuilding it's something that happens automatically. All right. Well, this is everything I have prepared for today. Knox and me will be hanging around for a few more minutes if you have more questions. Otherwise, we are going to be able, or you will be able to reach us by email. We'll leave a recording, or either this webinar or some of the others that we have done in the past. So in case you want to review something or anything. And again, well, thanks very much for attending today, and I hope you enjoyed.